The radio crackled to life at 0630 hours, cutting through the morning quiet at Fort Carson's Aviation Operations Center. Mayday, Mayday, this is Rescue 7. We're going down. Captain Sarachan dropped her coffee mug and lunged for the radio. Rescue 7, this is base. What's your status? Static filled the air for what felt like forever. Then Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez's voice came through, tight but controlled. Base, we have complete engine failure. Auto-rotating into Canyon Creek Valley. 3 souls on board. Chin grabbed the duty officer. Get the general. Now. 20 miles north, the Black Hawk helicopter settled hard onto a rocky ledge. The rotors wound down with a dying whine that echoed off the canyon walls. Rodriguez sat in the pilot's seat, hands still gripped on the controls, breathing hard. Everyone okay? He called back to the cabin. Sergeant Lisa Park unstrapped herself from the crew chief's seat. I'm good. She moved to check their passenger, Dr. James Morton from the Colorado Mountain Rescue Team. The gray-haired doctor was shaken but unhurt. What about those hikers? Dr. Morton asked, looking out at the wilderness around them. The Williams family is still out there somewhere. Rodriguez climbed out and walked around the helicopter. The engine compartment showed no obvious damage. No smoke, no leaking fluids. But something had gone very wrong very fast. The bird just died on them like someone had flipped a switch. Can you fix it? Park asked. Rodriguez shook his head. I can turn a wrench, but this is way above my pay grade. We need real mechanics. Back at the base, General Martinez stood over the radio console. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his fingers drummed against his leg. 30 years in the Army had taught him to stay calm when everything went sideways. Rescue 7, what's your assessment of the aircraft? Rodriguez's voice came back clear. Sir, the bird just quit on us. No warning lights, no unusual sounds. Engine was running smooth, then nothing. All electrical systems are down too. Martinez turned to his operations officer. How long to get a recovery team up there? The road ends about 5 miles from their position, sir. We'll need to hike in with equipment. Maybe 3 hours. And the weather? Captain Chin checked her tablet. Front moving in from the west. We've got maybe 6 hours before the snow hits. After that, nothing's flying for 2 days minimum. Martinez nodded grimly. The math was simple and ugly. The missing Williams family had been overdue for 18 hours already. Mom, Dad, and their 12-year-old daughter had planned a day hike near Canyon Creek. With the storm coming, their chances dropped to 0 if they weren't found today. Get our best mechanics up there, Martinez ordered. Full diagnostic equipment. Whatever they need. Within an hour, 2 Humvees rolled out loaded with equipment and personnel. Technical Sergeant Amy Walsh led the team, her toolbox rattling in the back of the lead vehicle. She'd been working on Army helicopters for 15 years. There wasn't much she hadn't seen. The convoy wound up mountain roads that got narrower and rougher with each mile. When they reached the end of the road, Walsh could see the Blackhawk's outline on the distant ridge through binoculars. Pack light but bring the important stuff, she told her team. We're humping 5 miles uphill with gear. The hike took longer than expected. The mechanics had to rest every few hundred yards, weighed down with diagnostic computers, test equipment, and tool kits. Above them, clouds gathered like a gray ceiling pressing down on the mountains. Walsh reached the crash site first. She was breathing hard but tried not to show it as Rodriguez and Park filled her in. Just died on you, she asked, pulling on work gloves. Like hitting a wall, Rodriguez said. Everything was normal, then nothing. Walsh popped the engine cowlings and started her initial inspection. The turbine looked perfect. No obvious damage, all the connections tight. She plugged her diagnostic computer into the helicopter's systems and waited for it to boot up. The screen stayed blank. That's weird, she muttered, checking the connections. Still nothing. Her team arrived 20 minutes later, hauling equipment up the rocky slope. They spread out around the helicopter like surgeons around an operating table. Cables snaked between test equipment and the aircraft's systems. Computer screens glowed blue in the mountain shadows. But one by one, the screens showed the same message: no data available. Walsh stood back and wiped sweat from her forehead, despite the cool mountain air. In 15 years of working on helicopters, she'd never seen anything like this. The bird looked perfect, but every system was dead. Not damaged, just dead. Rodriguez walked over. "Any luck?" Walsh shook her head. "It's like the helicopter is speaking a language our computers don't understand." Technical Sergeant Amy Walsh stared at the blank diagnostic screen for the third time. She unplugged the cable, checked the connection, and plugged it back in. Still nothing. "Try the backup interface," called Specialist Tony Kim from the other side of the helicopter. At 24, he was the youngest member of the team but knew the new digital systems better than anyone. Walsh moved to the secondary diagnostic port. Same result. The expensive computer that could troubleshoot 1,000 different helicopter problems couldn't even talk to this one. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered. Kim jogged over with his tablet, swiping through technical manuals. "According to the specs, this bird should be talking to us. Every system has built-in diagnostics." Sergeant First Class Robert Hayes emerged from under the helicopter's belly, grease smeared on his cheek. At 42, he was the old man of the team, steady and methodical. "Fuel system checks out. All the lines are intact, pumps look good." "What about electrical?" Walsh asked. "That's where it gets weird." Hayes wiped his hands on a rag. "Everything looks connected, but I'm not getting any readings on my meter." Above them, snow fell steadier now. Fat flakes that melted on the warm engine compartment but stuck to everything else. The temperature was dropping fast. Walsh pulled out her satellite phone and dialed the base. General Martinez answered on the second ring. "What's your status, Sergeant?" "Sir, we've got a problem. Our diagnostic equipment can't interface with the aircraft. It's like the helicopter's computers aren't there." "Are they damaged?" Walsh looked around at her team. Kim was trying a different cable. Hayes was checking circuit breakers. Everything looked normal, but nothing worked. "Negative, sir. No visible damage to anything. But we can't get any data from the systems." Martinez's voice carried the weight of command. "I'm patching you through to Boeing technical support. They built this bird. Maybe they can walk you through something we're missing." 5 minutes later, Walsh was on a conference call with 3 Boeing engineers sitting in a climate-controlled office in Philadelphia. She could hear the hum of air conditioning through the phone while snow crunched under her boots. "Can you access the maintenance menu?" asked the lead engineer. "Negative. No menu, no data, nothing. Try holding the diagnostic button for 10 seconds while powering up the main computer." Kim followed the instructions precisely. The screen flickered, then went dark again. "Still nothing," Walsh reported. The Boeing engineer's voice carried a note of confusion. "That's unusual. Can you send us photos of what you're seeing?" Walsh snapped pictures with her phone and sent them through the satellite link. She could hear typing on the other end of the call, then hushed conversation. "Sergeant, we're looking at the images now. Everything appears normal from what we can see. Have you tried the emergency diagnostic mode?" For the next hour, the Boeing team walked them through procedures Walsh had never heard of. Emergency modes, hidden menus, backup systems that supposedly existed in every helicopter. Nothing worked. Hayes sat on a rock, pulling apart a junction box with infinite patience. "I've checked every connection twice. Power's getting to where it needs to go, but nothing's talking back." Kim paced around the helicopter, tablet in hand, pulling up schematic after schematic. "The manuals say this is impossible. These systems are designed with multiple redundancies." Walsh felt frustration building in her chest. She'd fixed helicopters in sandstorms in Afghanistan, in monsoons in Korea, in conditions that would make normal people quit. But this bird was beating her with the simplest possible failure. It just wouldn't talk. The satellite phone buzzed. General Martinez again. Sergeant, I need an honest assessment. Can you get that helicopter flying? Walsh looked around at her team. Kim was staring at his tablet like it had personally insulted him. Hayes was methodically checking the same connections for the fourth time. Their diagnostic computers sat uselessly in the snow, expensive paperweights. Sir, I've never seen anything like this. The bird looks perfect, but we can't communicate with any of its systems. It's like trying to fix a car when you can't pop the hood. How long do you need? Walsh did the math in her head. They'd already burned 3 hours and learned nothing. The snow was getting heavier. In another 2 hours, visibility would be 0. Honestly, sir, at this rate, we might not figure it out at all. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Walsh wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Martinez spoke. Keep working, Sergeant. I'm going to make some calls. General Martinez sat in his office, staring at a coffee mug that had gone cold an hour ago. Through his window, he could see snow falling heavier now, coating the base in white. Time was running out. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a worn address book. Real paper, not digital. His fingers flipped through pages until he found what he was looking for. A name written in faded ink, Lorraine Porter. Martinez remembered the stories. How Porter had kept helicopters flying in Iraq when everyone said it couldn't be done. How she jury-rigged a Black Hawk with spare parts from 3 different aircraft and flew wounded soldiers to safety. The other mechanics called her the helicopter whisperer. That was 15 years ago. He picked up his phone and dialed the number. 60 miles away, Lorraine Porter was checking inventory in a warehouse that smelled like motor oil and old cardboard. At 58, she moved with the efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste motion. Her gray hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. The phone on her desk rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. Military area code. Porter Logistics. Ms. Porter, this is General Martinez at Fort Carson. I apologize for calling out of the blue. Lorraine set down her clipboard. She hadn't heard that tone in years. The careful formality of a commanding officer about to ask for something big. What can I do for you, General? We have a situation. A search and rescue helicopter is down in the mountains. Lives are at stake, and my best mechanics can't figure out what's wrong with it. I run a shipping company now, General. I don't work on aircraft anymore. I know. But I also know your reputation. Master Sergeant Porter, the woman who could make any helicopter fly. The old rank hit her like a punch to the chest. She'd worked hard to leave that person behind, to build a quiet life where the only emergencies were late deliveries and broken forklifts. That was a long time ago. The helicopter is a UH-60 Black Hawk. Our diagnostics show nothing wrong, but it won't start. Won't even talk to our computers. Lorraine walked to her office window. Outside, delivery trucks moved in and out of the loading dock. Simple problems with simple solutions. Not like the old days when aircraft broke in ways that defied logic and people died if you couldn't fix them. You have good mechanics, General. Better equipment than I ever had. They're stumped. And there's a family of hikers missing in this storm. Without that helicopter, they're not coming home. Lorraine closed her eyes. She could picture it all. The frustrated mechanics, the grounded aircraft, the clock ticking while people were counting on them. It was a movie she'd seen too many times. I haven't touched a military helicopter in 10 years. Some things you don't forget. The line went quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights above her head. Through her office door, she could see her employees loading trucks, focused on their work. Good jobs, steady pay, nobody shooting at them. Where exactly is this helicopter? Martinez gave her the coordinates. Lorraine pulled up a map on her computer. Canyon Creek Valley. She knew the area from weekend hiking trips with her late husband. Rough country, especially in winter. How bad is the weather up there? Getting worse by the hour. If we don't get that bird flying today, nobody's going home until spring. Lorraine stared at the map. Somewhere in those mountains, a family was fighting for their lives. And somewhere else, a helicopter crew was depending on people like her to get them out. I'll need to see the aircraft myself. I can have a vehicle pick you up in 30 minutes. I'll drive myself. She was already reaching for her coat. And General? I'm not making any promises. It's been a long time. I understand. Thank you, Miss Porter. Lorraine hung up and stood in her quiet office for a moment. On the wall hung a photo from her retirement ceremony. Younger faces, proud smiles, handshakes with officers whose names she'd mostly forgotten. Below it sat a small American flag, folded in the traditional triangle. She grabbed her keys and headed for the door. Janet, she called to her office manager, cancel my afternoon meetings. Something came up. The Humvee bounced over the mountain road, chains clanking against the tires. Lorraine Porter sat in the passenger seat, watching familiar terrain roll by through a veil of snow. General Martinez rode beside her, briefing her on what his team had tried. Every diagnostic test came back negative, he said. Boeing's technical support walked them through procedures I had never heard of. Nothing worked. Lorraine nodded but didn't respond. Her stomach felt tight. What if she couldn't figure it out either? What if 15 years away had dulled her edge? The helicopter came into view as they crested the ridge. Even from a distance, Lorraine could see the frustrated body language of the mechanics working around it. Equipment scattered everywhere, cables snaking through the snow, computer screens glowing uselessly. Ma'am, the driver called back, this is as far as the road goes. Quarter-mile walk from here. Lorraine stepped out into ankle-deep snow. The cold air bit at her face, carrying the metallic smell of aircraft and the ozone scent of electronic equipment. Sounds she remembered from a dozen deployments. Technical Sergeant Walsh looked up as they approached. Her face showed the strain of 6 hours with no progress. General, this is Lorraine Porter, Martinez said. She's here to take a look at our problem child. Walsh extended a gloved hand. Ma'am, I've heard stories about you from some of the older guys. Don't believe everything you hear, Lorraine said, but she shook the offered hand. Walsh's grip was firm, confident. Good sign. Lorraine walked slowly around the helicopter. The mechanics watched her like she might perform magic, and that made her uncomfortable. She was just a woman who used to fix things. Nothing more. The Black Hawk looked newer than any she'd worked on. Sleeker lines, digital displays where analog gauges used to be. Everything was cleaner, more precise. More complicated. Show me what you've tried, she said. For the next 20 minutes, Walsh and her team walked Lorraine through their troubleshooting process. They demonstrated the diagnostic computers, showed her the Boeing procedures, explained how every system appeared normal but remained unresponsive. Lorraine listened without interrupting. These were good mechanics, methodical and thorough. They'd done everything by the book. The problem was the book might be wrong. Can I borrow a flashlight? She asked. Specialist Kim handed her a small LED light. Lorraine knelt beside the helicopter and started her own examination. She moved differently than the younger mechanics. Slower, more deliberate. Her hands traced wiring harnesses and checked connections they'd already verified twice. The computers can't see anything wrong, she said after 10 minutes. But computers only know what they're programmed to look for. Ma'am? Walsh sounded puzzled. Lorraine stood, brushing snow from her knees. In Iraq, we had a bird that the diagnostics said was perfect. Ran all the tests, everything green. But it wouldn't start. The mechanics packed up their equipment as darkness fell. Lorraine watched them load cables and computers into cases, their faces showing the exhaustion of a day spent fighting a machine that wouldn't cooperate. You sure you want to stay up here alone? Walsh asked. It's going to get cold. I've worked in worse, Lorraine said. She accepted the thermos of coffee and battery-powered work lights they offered. General Martinez approached as the team prepared to leave. "Miss Porter, I want you to know how much I appreciate this." "Don't thank me yet, General. I might not be able to help. The attempt matters." After the vehicles disappeared down the mountain road, Lorraine stood in the falling snow beside the silent helicopter. The work lights cast harsh shadows that danced in the wind. For the first time in hours, it was quiet. She set up 2 lights inside the cockpit and began her real examination. First, she turned off her phone. No diagnostic computers, no technical manuals, no outside voices. Just her, the helicopter, and whatever secrets it was keeping. Lorraine started with her hands. She ran her fingers along every wire harness she could reach, feeling for breaks, loose connections, anything the sophisticated equipment might have missed. The new systems were more complex than what she remembered, but wires were still wires. Nothing felt wrong. Next, she used her nose. Aircraft problems often had distinctive smells. Burned electronics, overheated hydraulics, electrical shorts. She breathed deeply, sorting through the normal odors of metal and lubricants. Nothing unusual there either. Then she started listening. Lorraine sat in the pilot's seat and tried to start the helicopter. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. She tried again, this time closing her eyes and focusing on the sound. Most people heard nothing useful in the grinding of a starter motor, but Lorraine had learned to hear conversations. The engine was trying to start. She could hear the fuel system engaging, the ignition firing. But something was stopping it at the last second, like a door slamming shut just as someone tried to walk through. She climbed out and opened the engine cowling. With her flashlight, she examined every component the other mechanics had already checked. But she wasn't looking for obvious damage anymore. She was looking for things that seemed almost right. An hour into her search, she found it. On the main engine control unit, a small connector looked perfect at first glance. But when Lorraine wiggled it gently, it moved just slightly. Not loose enough to fall off, but not tight enough to maintain a solid connection under stress. She traced the wire from that connector. It led to the engine's central computer, the brain that controlled fuel flow, ignition timing, and a dozen other systems. If that connection was intermittent, the computer would receive confusing signals. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was how the helicopter's integrated systems responded to confusion. Lorraine sat back on her heels in the snow, thinking. The new helicopters weren't like the old ones she'd learned on. Those older birds had independent systems. If the engine computer failed, you could still control other functions manually. But this Blackhawk was designed with everything talking to everything else. If the central computer received bad data, it would shut down all connected systems to prevent damage. A safety feature that became a fatal flaw. The loose connection would work fine on the ground during diagnostics. Only under the vibration and stress of flight would it start to fail. And when it did, the helicopter's own safety systems would kill the aircraft to protect it. She pulled out her phone and called General Martinez. "Sir, it's Porter. I think I found your problem." "What is it?" "A loose wire." "But it's not what you think." She explained her theory while she continued examining the connection under her flashlight. The connector showed signs of corrosion, probably from moisture that had worked its way in over months or years. "So the helicopter is shutting itself down?" Martinez asked. "In a way, yes. The safety systems think the engine is malfunctioning, so they cut power to everything. It's like your smoke detector going off and shutting down your whole house. Can you fix it?" Lorraine stared at the tiny connector. In the old days, she would have cleaned the corrosion, tightened the connection, and been done. But this helicopter's computer would remember the fault. Even with the connection repaired, the system might refuse to start unless she could convince it that everything was okay. That would require bypassing safety protocols designed by engineers who assumed no one would ever need to override them. "Maybe," she said. "But I'll need to do things that aren't in any manual." "What kind of things?" The kind that would make your safety officer have nightmares. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. In the background, she could hear the operations center, people talking in urgent voices about weather forecasts and search zones. Ms. Porter, there's a 12-year-old girl out there who won't survive another night in this storm. Do whatever you have to do. Lorraine hung up and looked at the connector again. She had the tools to clean it, but the real challenge would be convincing a computer that had been programmed never to trust anything that it should trust her instead. Dawn broke gray and cold over the mountains. Lorraine Porter sat in the snow beside the helicopter, her thermos empty and her hands numb despite her work gloves. She'd spent the night cleaning corrosion from the tiny connector and splicing in a bypass wire that would fool the computer into thinking everything was normal. The sound of vehicles climbing the mountain road broke the morning silence. General Martinez arrived with Walsh's team, their faces tense with the urgency of another day lost. Any luck? Martinez asked as he approached. Lorraine stood slowly, her joints stiff from the cold night. Maybe. But you're not going to like how I fixed it. She led them to the engine compartment and pointed to her work. A thin wire now ran around the original connector, held in place with electrical tape and zip ties. It looked like something a shade tree mechanic would do, not a solution for $1 million aircraft. Ma'am, Walsh said carefully, that's not exactly regulation. No, it's not. Lorraine wiped her hands on a rag. The original connector was corroded, causing intermittent signals to the engine computer. When the computer got confused, it shut down everything as a safety measure. And the bypass wire? Kim asked. Tricks the computer into thinking the connection is clean. But we'll need to manually monitor what the original connector was supposed to watch. Hayes frowned. That's a lot of systems to monitor manually. It's how we flew helicopters for 30 years before computers took over, Lorraine said. Pilots actually had to pay attention to their instruments. Rodriguez stepped forward. He'd been quiet since they arrived, but now his voice carried the weight of command decision. Ma'am, I'll be the one flying this bird. What are the risks? Lorraine looked at the young pilot. In his face, she saw every aircrew member she'd ever worked to bring home safely. The same mix of courage and concern, the same willingness to trust their lives to her work. The bypass should hold, she said. But if it fails, you'll lose engine control with no warning. The computer won't be able to help you auto-rotate. And if we don't try? Through the trees, they could see the search area where the Williams family had spent 2 nights in freezing temperatures. The storm had passed, but hypothermia didn't wait for perfect weather. We try, Rodriguez said. Martinez gathered his team around the helicopter. I want everyone to understand what we're doing here. Ms. Porter has identified the problem and provided a solution. It's unconventional, but so is keeping birds flying in combat zones with bubble gum and baling wire. Walsh looked skeptical. Sir, the manual says. The manual didn't anticipate this situation, Martinez cut her off. Sometimes you have to choose between following procedures and saving lives. Lorraine watched the exchange, remembering similar conversations in dusty forward operating bases. Young mechanics worried about regulations while people needed help. The tension never got easier. Sergeant Walsh, she said quietly, in Iraq, I once kept a Black Hawk flying with a rotor hub held together by safety wire and prayers. It wasn't in any manual, but it got 18 wounded soldiers to a field hospital. Walsh studied Lorraine's face, seeing something there that made her nod slowly. What do you need from us? For the next hour, they prepared the helicopter for flight. Lorraine walked Rodriguez through the manual monitoring procedures, showing him which gauges to watch and what signs might indicate the bypass was failing. It's like flying the old birds, she explained. You become part of the machine. Feel every vibration, hear every change in engine tone. My grandfather flew Hueys in Vietnam, Rodriguez said. He always said the helicopter would tell you what it needed if you knew how to listen. Smart man. The engine start sequence felt different this time. Instead of the confident roar of a computer-controlled system, the helicopter came alive gradually, like something awakening from deep sleep. Lorraine stood beside the cockpit, watching gauges and listening to sounds the computers couldn't interpret. "How's it feel?" she called to Rodriguez. "Strange, but good. Like the bird is actually talking to me instead of just following programming." The rescue mission launched 20 minutes later. Lorraine watched the helicopter disappear over the ridge, carrying the search team toward the last known position of the Williams family. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with updates from the operations center. 2 hours later, it buzzed with the news she'd been waiting for. All 3 members of the Williams family found alive. Cold and scared, but alive. The helicopter was inbound with survivors. When the Black Hawk touched down at the base, Lorraine was waiting. Rodriguez shut down the engine and climbed out, grinning despite his exhaustion. "How'd she fly?" Lorraine asked. "Like a dream. Different from the computer-controlled version, but better somehow. More honest." General Martinez approached as the medical team loaded the rescued family into ambulances. "Ms. Porter, I don't know how to thank you." Lorraine was already walking toward her truck. The job was done, and she had a business to run. "Just take care of your people, General. And maybe trust them a little more than the computers." As she drove away from the base, Lorraine saw the Williams family being reunited with relatives who'd driven through the night to be there. A 12-year-old girl hugged her parents while snow continued to fall around them. If Lorraine's story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of unsung heroes.